Hello and welcome to the Deep Dive. Thanks so much for joining us here on Westferry Times. Today, we're really getting into the often unsettling world of UK true crime, specifically looking at 2025. We're going to try and unpack some of these big new cases, the ones hitting the headlines, and also delve into something really tough, wrongful convictions. Plus, we'll look at how some very old cold cases are suddenly back in the spotlight. It's quite a lot to get through. But our mission today is really to pull back the curtain a bit on what's happening within UK law enforcement and the justice system right now.
It's definitely a critical area, and yeah, I'm glad we have a chance to maybe shed some light on it.
Absolutely. And guiding us through this complex landscape, we're really pleased to welcome Dr. Alex Morgan. Dr. Morgan is a well-respected criminal justice scholar and also a former investigator, so brings decades of real frontline experience. It's genuinely fantastic to have you with us.
Thanks very much. Happy to be here.
Right then. Let's just jump straight in, shall we? The last year or so has thrown up some really gripping new cases here in the UK. What are maybe one or two that you think really stand out that kind of define the current moment?
Well, yeah, two definitely spring to mind immediately. First, there's the ongoing disappearance of Sophie Palmer, the 23-year-old from Manchester. The level of public interest, the sheer engagement, has been huge. But despite massive searches, all the media attention, we still don't have answers. It's very troubling.
It is extraordinary how that one case has just resonated so deeply. Why do you think that is? Why has it captured everyone's attention like this?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? You've got this collision of something seemingly so random. A young woman vanishes practically in broad daylight, and then these unsettling gaps, the lack of clear CCTV, for instance. Plus, her family has run this incredibly effective social media campaign, very raw, very real. It kind of taps into this shared anxiety, I think, that feeling that it could happen to anyone.
Yeah, that randomness is terrifying. It makes perfect sense. And the second case you mentioned.
That would be the double homicide over in East London, involving a fairly well-known entrepreneur and his partner. What's striking there is, the high profile of the victims, obviously, but also the fact that police are clearly investigating very hard, yet. No charges, nothing yet.
Hmm.
It just shows how complex, even seemingly clear-cut situations can become.
Two very different cases, but they do paint a picture, don't they? When you see these big cases unfolding, how do you feel the authorities are coping? Are they, equipped for this level of scrutiny and pressure?
That really is the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
We're still seeing the effects of post-pandemic strain on resources, staffing issues in some forces,
Yeah.
and public pressure. Well, it's a double-edged sword. It can drive things forward, definitely. But it can also potentially lead to investigations feeling rushed, maybe overlooking key details. It's a really, really tough balancing act for investigators on the ground.
Yeah, that's a sobering thought. Okay, let's shift gears a little to something equally vital and frankly quite disturbing, the fact that the justice system isn't infallible, wrongful convictions. Can you maybe highlight a recent UK case that really brings this home?
Absolutely. The exoneration just recently of Marcus Flynn, he served 18 years, 18 years for a murder in Bristol he absolutely did not commit. And the crucial thing here was new DNA testing, technology that just wasn't available back when he was convicted in 2006. That tech was able to definitively prove his innocence.
18 years. It's
Yeah.
almost impossible to comprehend. The lost time. What does that actually do to someone?
Oh, it's catastrophic. It's devastating. You're talking about almost 2 decades of your life just
Yeah.
stolen. Add to that the trauma of prison, knowing you're innocent, and then the immense challenge of trying to rebuild your life afterwards. And Marcus's story, sadly, it's not unique. We also saw the case of Claire Hunt, wrongfully convicted for arson in Liverpool. She lost nearly 10 years before finally being cleared.
It's just awful. What are the common threads? What keeps going wrong that leads to these terrible miscarriages of justice?
Well, there tend to be several recurring factors. Sometimes it's flawed forensic science techniques, maybe thought reliable at the time, but later shown to be, well, inaccurate or overstated. Eyewitness misidentification is another big one. It happens far more often than people realize, and memories can be incredibly unreliable. Then you have things like potentially coerced confessions. Intense interrogations can sometimes lead innocent people to confess. And a really significant factor is something called tunnel vision.
Okay, tunnel vision. Let's unpack that. What does that mean in practice during an investigation?
Right, so it's essentially a kind of cognitive bias. Investigators might latch on to a suspect quite early on. Maybe there's some plausible evidence or a gut feeling. And then consciously or subconsciously, they start focusing only on evidence that supports their theory, and they downplay or even ignore evidence that points away from that suspect. It means they can head down completely the wrong path and miss the actual perpetrator.
That's genuinely chilling. So given these problems keep cropping up, are things getting any better? Is the system learning?
Progress is happening. I'd say it's slow, but it's there. The advances in DNA technology are obviously a huge positive. It provides a level of certainty we didn't have before. There's also, I think, a growing awareness, maybe pressure, for more independent forensic reviews in major cases. That second look can be vital. But changing things like eyewitness ID procedures or interrogation training, those systemic changes are often slower and harder to implement across the board.
Okay. Let's move on to something that maybe offers a bit more hope amidst the difficulties, the reopening of cold cases. We seem to be hearing about this more often lately. Any particular ones catching your eye?
Yeah, definitely a trend there. Two recent ones are quite significant. First, the 1994 murder of Jamie Clark up in Glasgow. A new witness has actually come forward after, 30 years? That's potentially huge. And then there's the disappearance of Priya Patel, a teenager who went missing back in 2001. In her case, it's really these technological breakthroughs that are allowing investigators to re-examine old evidence in new ways.
Right, you mentioned technology. What specifically are we talking about? What tools are making the difference in these really old cases?
Well, a key one is advanced DNA extraction. Scientists can now sometimes get a usable DNA profile from incredibly tiny or really degraded samples, things that were just impossible to analyze, say, 20 years ago. A single hair, a fragment of skin under a fingernail. And also AI. Artificial intelligence is being used more for things like facial recognition, trying to match faces from really old, maybe grainy CCTV footage against databases. It's not perfect, but it can sift through vast amounts of data much faster than humans ever could.
Wow, it's like applying future tech to past mysteries. What does this possibility, this reopening of cases, mean for the families who've waited, sometimes decades, for answers?
Oh, it's immense. It offers potential.
Yeah.
The potential for closure. Closure is a complex word, but just getting answers. After decades of not knowing, of living in limbo, just finding out what happened, even if the truth is painful, can be incredibly powerful. It allows grief to maybe take a different shape.
Yeah, that brings us right back to the human cost in all of this, doesn't it? We talk about cases, evidence, procedures. But what's it actually like for the families living through this, stuck in this uncertainty, sometimes for years and years?
It's often described as a particular kind of hell, really.
Yeah.
A state of suspended reality. You're grieving, obviously, but you can't fully process that grief because there's no finality. There might still be hope, however faint. That constant uncertainty, that emotional roller coaster, it takes a massive toll. We see high rates of PTSD symptoms, anxiety, depression, and often, sadly, a deep loss of faith in the justice system they thought would protect them or find answers.
It's hard to even imagine living with that day in, day out.
Exactly. And, what often gets missed is the incredible work these families do themselves. They become the investigators, the campaigners, the advocates. They refuse to let the case be forgotten. Honestly, they're often responsible for pushing things forward, for getting cases reopened, far more than they get credit for.
A really important point. So, looking forward now, what do you see as the biggest hurdles, the major challenges facing the UK justice system right now in actually solving crimes effectively and making sure justice is done?
Well, there are several big issues, and they're often interconnected. Underfunding is still a major factor. It puts immense pressure on resources, meaning investigators are overworked, labs might be stretched. That increases the risk of errors. Political pressure can sometimes distort priorities too. But perhaps one of the biggest underlying challenges is a sort of institutional reluctance sometimes to admit when mistakes have been made.
That reluctance. Why is admitting error so crucial?
Because you can't fix a problem if you don't acknowledge it exists. True justice isn't just about getting a conviction. It's about getting the right conviction, about finding the truth. If the system can't openly look at its mistakes, learn from them, then those same mistakes risk being repeated. Transparency, accountability, they're fundamental for trust.
Makes total sense. Okay, we've had some really thoughtful questions come in from listeners. Let's try and tackle a couple. First one. Is there a specific cold case in the UK right now that you think is genuinely close, maybe on the brink of being solved?
Based purely on the recent news, that new witness,
Mm-hmm.
I'd say the Jamie Clark case in Glasgow seems to have, the most current momentum. It feels like there's real potential there for a breakthrough relatively soon. But you never know for sure with cold cases.
Okay. Another listener asks, how can ordinary people, people not involved in law enforcement, actually help prevent wrongful convictions? What can we do?
That's a great question. I think jury service is key. Going in with an open mind, Listening critically to all the evidence, questioning assumptions, not just accepting everything at face value, understanding things like the fallibility of eyewitness testimony, also supporting organizations that work on these issues, that push for better standards, that raise awareness. That definitely helps too.
Right. And one final question. If someone genuinely believes a loved one, a family member, has been wrongfully convicted, what's the very first thing they should do? Where do they even start?
Okay, first step, document absolutely everything. Timelines, evidence, inconsistencies, potential witnesses who weren't heard, get it all organized. Second, and this is crucial, find a solicitor. But not just any solicitor, one who specifically has experience with criminal appeals and miscarriage of justice cases. They have the right expertise. And third, if there was any biological evidence at all in the original case, push hard for modern DNA testing if it hasn't already been done recently. That can be the key that unlocks everything.
This has been such an insightful conversation and, yeah, quite moving at times, too. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and perspective with us today on the deep dive.
No, thank you. It's been a really important discussion. Glad to contribute.
And a huge thank you to all of you listening and watching Westferry Times. If this deep dive resonated with you, maybe consider looking into organizations like the Innocence Project UK. They do incredible work fighting wrongful convictions. You can find more deep dives like this one, exploring important topics, right here on the Westferry Times channel. So please do subscribe, maybe share this with others you think might be interested in justice issues. Until our next deep dive, please stay curious, stay compassionate, and always remember, the pursuit of truth really matters. Goodbye for now.